There are a lot of cycling brands built around speed, around watts, podiums, and marginal gains, and the idea that performance is the whole point of riding a bike. Café du Cycliste was never really interested in that version of cycling. This brand didn't come from a race team, a factory floor, or a background in elite competition. It started with a cafe stop in the hills above Nice, a place riders paused mid-ride, not to upload numbers or compare stats, but to drink coffee, talk, and enjoy being outside. And once you understand that, the rest of the brand starts to make a lot more sense. Rémi Clermont didn't come from the cycling industry. Before Café du Cycliste existed, he was working in IT, in cybersecurity, doing enterprise-level work for Silicon Valley companies with a European headquarters near Nice. And before that though, there was a sport, a serious sport. Rémi competed in kayaking at a pretty high level, racing white water as part of the French setup. Years spent outdoors in the mountains, training in cold conditions, learning what technical clothing actually means when you're exposed to the elements for hours at a time. That background is important because when Rémi talks about cycling in interviews, he doesn't talk like someone who grew up racing bikes. He talks like someone who sees cycling as an outdoor activity first and a sport second, something closer to hiking or mountaineering than competition. Cycling for him isn't really about winning, it's about landscape, about elevation, and about being outside. It's about riding with people. And I think that perspective shaped everything that followed. Café du Cycliste didn't start as a brand strategy. It barely started as a business. In 2009, Rémi's riding mate and colleague, André Stewart, invested in a cafe in the hills above Nice. And Rémi eventually joined him, looking for a way out of a career that no longer felt like him. The idea wasn't to build a global apparel brand, it was simply to make cycling clothing for the cafe. One pair of bib shorts, 2 or 3 jerseys, something that felt different to what was already out there. The clothing side grew faster than the cafe ever did and eventually became the main thing. But that cafe first mentality never really left the brand. One of the most important things about Café du Cycliste is that Rémi didn't inherit cycling design rules. He wasn't coming from a race background, wasn't steeped in Peloton aesthetics or team kits like so many other brands, and he wasn't trying to improve on what already existed. He was trying to make what he personally wanted to wear. So instead of looking inward at cycling, he looked outward at French workwear, at outdoor clothing, at mountaineering, at vintage sportswear, at the Riviera landscape itself. Breton stripes weren't a gimmick, they were cultural. Mountains weren't marketing, they were where he rode. Technically, he had to learn everything from scratch: fabrics, construction, and manufacturing. Rémi talks a lot about spending years asking questions, visiting factories, and attending trade shows, and basically being a student of garment making. The goal was never to outperform race kit. It was to create something that felt premium, durable, and considered without screaming race every time you put it on. And that's where Café du Cycliste found its lane. There's no avoiding it. The brand sits firmly in the premium end of cycling apparel. European fabrics, European manufacturing, and smaller production runs. They have higher costs naturally. That's just the reality of how they operate. But what's really interesting is how little they lean into the performance theatre. Rémi has said repeatedly that most cyclists aren't pros. They don't ride like pros. They ride socially and they ride for health. That thinking explains a lot of the brand's choices, softer aesthetics and muted colours, and occasionally pieces that divide opinion. Hoods on cycling jerseys, gravel collections worn on the road, clothing that doesn't neatly fit into the performance categories.
First off, the jersey. This is the women's super light jersey. It's £162. The website states it's built for high summer riding, really thin fabric.
Rémi's response to criticism is always consistent. If you're worried about losing 2 seconds to drag, this probably isn't for you. And that's fine. Café du Cycliste talks about community, but they also built a place where you can physically experience it. The flagship in Nice isn't just a shop, it is a cafe, it's a meeting point and a rental hub, as well as being a base for riding in the region. He described the cafe as the flesh around the bones, the physical expression of something that otherwise lives online. It's where the brand stops being abstract and becomes real. And that physical approach hasn't gone away as the brand has expanded. Their newer stores like Munich aren't trying to recreate the Riviera, they're clean, calm and modern spaces that still feel unmistakably Café du Cycliste, but tuned to the city that they're in. Even people who are critical of the brand online often admit the same thing. The space is good and the experience is considered, and the clothing makes more sense when you see it and touch it. That same restraint carries through online. Their Instagram and YouTube don't feel like product feeds. They feel like a journal. Clean layouts, strong photography, and slow pacing. There's landscapes, texture, people riding, people standing still. On YouTube, they tell quieter stories, films about sustainability, upcycling, and long-term partnerships. Some videos do big numbers, and others barely move at all, and they seem completely comfortable with that. It feels brand-led rather than algorithm-led. It's a risky move in 2025, but very on-brand for them. Which brings us to how the internet sees Café du Cycliste. Because online, especially on Reddit, the brand is divisive. You'll see people saying it's lost its way, the older collections were more restrained, and that the designs used to be quieter, and that Dove logo appears too often now. Some riders clearly miss the earlier Café du Cycliste, the toned-down jerseys and the subtle detailing. At the same time, though, you'll see the opposite argument just as strongly. People saying that they love the new direction and that at least the branding is doing something different, and that Café du Cycliste still has a point of view. Quality almost never seems to be the debate. Even people who don't like the look tend to admit that the garments are beautifully made. Expensive, yes, but well built and thought through. More like real clothes than race costumes, but price always comes up. The dentist jokes, the who is this actually for comments, and in a strange way, that reinforces the brand position rather than undermining it. Café du Cycliste has never tried to be accessible to everyone. It's been comfortable being polarizing. What you're really seeing in those threads isn't a brand failing, it's a brand choosing a direction, knowing that it will alienate some people along the way. Café du Cycliste now sits in a very deliberate place in cycling culture. It's too expressive for the pure performance crowd, and it's too expensive for casual riders, too cycling focused to be fashion, and too lifestyle led to be traditional kit. And that tension is exactly the point. In a market where so many brands converge on the same visual language, Café du Cycliste still feels opinionated. Sometimes that opinion lands, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's rarely boring. And in cycling, where identity increasingly matters as much as output, that might be the brand's real strength. So there we go. That's Café du Cycliste. It's a pretty cool brand. I love the story, and I love that it comes from a guy who doesn't really have experience in the world of apparel and cycling clothing. If you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe. And if you've got this far, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.